Beautiful, Steve. Thank you. All right, good morning. So when I first came into religious science many years ago, I was working downtown for the home office of our denomination. That's where it was located then. One day a minister called and he said he needed someone to teach Sunday school. Did I know anybody? And because I was already thinking about becoming a minister, I thought, well, I should probably do that. I should have some experience in that area. It was a really interesting year of teaching Sunday school, I'm here to tell you. One thing I did, I remember, was I decided to do an Easter egg hunt, much like we do here, only we had a much smaller group of kids. But on Easter Sunday, probably about 25 kids showed up, and I had stuffed hundreds of eggs. And in the process of stuffing the eggs, okay, I ate a lot of the candy myself, okay? And so I wound up having a lot of plastic eggs that were empty. And I was thinking, what am I going to put in the eggs? What am I going to put in the eggs? And so I was looking around the house, and I realized that on my dresser, I had like 3 rolls of quarters. Because back then, you know, we used to roll change, you know. Now we just take it and dump it into the bin at the store, and it counts it up for us and gives us an Amazon gift card. But anyway, so in some of the eggs, I put quarters, right? And so after church, we have this Easter egg hunt outside, and it's all going very, very well, right up until some kid opens an egg and screams out, "Oh my God, there's money in these eggs!" And pandemonium broke loose. I mean, it just went insane, insane, insane. So the same little group of kids that I was very fond with, I had decided that I would teach them the story of the prodigal son. Yeah, I thought everybody should know that story. That's a really important story. So I'm trying to explain to the kids, you know, there was a father and he had 2 sons, and one son took part of his inheritance and went off and, you know, spent it all and then came back home, and his brother was out in the field, and the father is so happy to see the son who went away come back. He says, "We're going to slaughter the fatted calf. We're going to have a great party." And I said, "Who do you think wasn't happy about this? Who in the story do you think?" And one little boy's arm shot up. And I said, yeah, Tom, who do you think wasn't happy here? And he says, "The calf." Honest to God, it's true. It's true. So in New Thought, one of the things that really distinguishes New Thought, which we are a New Thought church, from other teachings, is that we believe that there is a spiritual truth within that is not necessarily immediately reflected in the without. So we will either be guided by an internal knowing, what we believe to be the greater spiritual truth, which is on the unseen side of life, or we will be guided by what's happening out here in the manifest world. So this really didn't come about until the age of New Thought, where people had this understanding that, yeah, there are things happening out here, that the outer level of manifestation is the last level of creation because things cook in consciousness for a long time before they ultimately show up out here in the world. We've been thinking along a certain line, believing along a certain line, accepting along a certain line, long before things show up out here. So with the advent of New Thought, what was extraordinary was that this idea that, you know, yes, this is happening out here. We're not denying that things are happening out here in the outer world, that there's weather or traffic or this or that or the other thing. But there is a spiritual truth beyond what I see with my physical eyes that is more real than what we're experiencing out here in the outer world. So Science of Mind teaches us that what we see comes from what we don't see. All right? So by the time something shows up out here, like I said, it's old news. We've been thinking along a certain line probably for a while. You know, so our thoughts, our beliefs, our intentions, the mental pictures that we have been entertaining, you know, being receptive, you know, and all of these things contribute to the pattern on the inside, which ultimately is reflected in experience out here. You know, it would be silly of us to think that if I don't like what's going on out here, the way to change it is out here. Silly in terms of that's not what New Thought teaches us, because out here, by the time it's out here, it's an effect, right? That's like going to the movie theater, and if you don't like what's on the movie, going up and hitting the screen. trying to change the screen. It makes no sense. That's not where it's originating from. Where it's originating from is back in the, well, I don't, do they even still have a projection booth? I guess they do. I mean, I don't even know if they do it the way they used to do it. But, so when I'm talking about outer manifestation or effects, that's everything that we perceive with our 5 senses. Anything that is an effect did not make itself. Let's be very clear. But there is a power back of it that caused it to come forth into expression. Right? And we would say in the science of mind that there is a mental cause behind all physical form that shows up in the world. So what we want to remember is that we as a creator, each of us is an individualized center of God consciousness, and that each of us as a creator, we are always greater than the creation itself. So speaking of the prodigal son, which is my absolute favorite Bible story, I think like the prodigal son, we always have a choice. And we can miscreate. And we can miscreate and we can miscreate until a little light goes off in our head and says, you could do this differently. It doesn't have to be this way. So we are always welcome back to the Father's house, which is really our home. See, science of mind, I think, is so big, so open, so inclusive in its thinking, and at the same time, it's also very, very empowering. Because if I want something to change in my life, and the power, the dominion doesn't exist in me, I'm really not going to have a lot of success at trying to improve things in my life and therefore in my world. But if it originates in me, and this is what we teach, that causation is within. If it originates in me, then I can do something about it. In our textbook, Ernest Holmes says that the science of mind does not promise something for nothing. But we do teach that you can have whatever you become in consciousness. Now, to me, that's one of the most interesting things in the whole textbook, that we can have whatever we become in consciousness. So I say, all right, I want good health, or I want a job I love that pays me well, or I want a wonderful, loving relationship. I want to be creatively fulfilled in my expression in the world. Science of mind says, okay, how do you become that in consciousness? Because the universe, God does not limit any of those things. It's not like God says, oh my God, I've already had, 6 billion people be healed over here. I can't do you too. Or, oh no, this many people are doing work that they love. I'm out of work that they love for you. All the good people are taken, all the money's gone. No, that's not the universe's response. It always comes back to how do I, as an individualized center of spirit, as a place where God resides like no place else, how do I become more in consciousness? Now, I know we are all faced with a million things throughout the day. And one of the best things I've ever come across in terms of a metaphysical practice is what Emmett Fox gives us in his little booklet called The Golden Key. And it's very, very simple. It's very simple because it's primarily the opposite of the thinking of the world. Emmett Fox says that when you think about the problem, what you do is you call in more of the problem, right? Because you're already vibrating at that frequency. That's all you see. It's all you think about. It's all you talk about. All right, nobody here, but people we probably know, right? So instead, the technique he gives us, he says the golden key is, instead of always thinking and talking and remembering and rehearsing the problem, simply to do this, that every time you would be tempted to do that is to think about God instead. And say, well, that's so simple. Can that possibly work? It does. I am here to tell you it absolutely does. See, the problem that I have found that most people in New Thought, in metaphysics do, is that we'll say a treatment or we'll do an affirmation and then we're looking for the results. It's like, all right, I prayed, where is it? I prayed, where is it? But this is a process, this golden key, of transforming ourselves from the inside out, from really becoming different on the inside, so that then the result that we experience out here is a reflection of the inner. So to think about God instead of the problem, we think, well, how can that possibly work? First of all, this is one of those, don't ask why, because why, there's not a good answer to why, it just works. And those of us who've been in the teaching for a while know that we have an understanding of spiritual law works. It doesn't wait for our good opinion about it. It doesn't wait for validation or anything like that. The law just works. So there's probably something in your life today where we all have these areas where we kind of obsess about things and we think about it again and again and again and again and again. what if we really started to say, okay, when I am tempted to go down that path, what if I started to think about God instead? What if every time I dug up that problem, every time I started to give it attention, I think about God instead? See, because what this does is that this brings our conscious and our subjective mind into agreement. And that, Ernest Holmes says, there's no demonstration, there's no healing in the physical world unless our conscious mind and our subjective mind are in complete agreement. So to think about God instead, it would be that agreement, that truth about God is the truth about me, that truth about God is the truth about you. In Science of Mind, we say that God is whole and perfect and complete. So that must mean that I am whole and perfect and complete, that you are whole and perfect and complete. This is very powerful because you will notice, as I have noticed, that thinking about the problem again and again and again, talking about it, calling a few people, having a meeting, all the things that we do, rehearsing it and telling it over, no good comes from that. No good comes from that. In fact, I would hold that at the end of that, we actually feel worse. We feel a little lower. We get taken down the drain a little bit more. Again, what we want to remember is one alone in consciousness with the infinite, in other words, one with God, is the majority, right? And so if you will stand in the spiritual truth, the truth about God is the truth about you, it's the truth about me, that's the majority, that's where the power is in our life. The power that moves through the entire universe, the power that creates the entire universe is the same power that is within us. We call it God, we call it spirit, we call it love, we call it infinite intelligence. So those negative things that are happening in the world, those are outer manifestations, right? And we have to stop letting the negatives of the world control us, I believe, right? That somebody's got to get off the carousel. It looks to me like it's got to be us. That we have to stop allowing ourselves to be controlled by external events, external manifestations, because, the more we give power to those things outside of us, the more power they will, in fact, have in our life. It is people, not God, that limit. I want to say that again, because limitation is not in God's consciousness. God does not have a poverty consciousness. God does not have a lacking consciousness. God is the actual abundance of the universe itself. And God, I believe, knows only to give of God's self to each of us fully and completely all of the time. Right? So Ernest Holmes said this, and I really like this week. He said, let us learn to see as God must, with a perfect vision. And so I just that much, I think, I look at conditions, I look at situations, and I think, God, that doesn't look good to me. That doesn't look good to me. So how can I do what Ernest says to see with a perfect vision? And part of it is going back to that when I'm looking out here, this is the world of manifest form. But back here, where cause is originating within us is something greater. There's always something greater. Suffering and limitation appear as an outward manifestation in the world, but in divine mind, in the mind of God, there is no suffering. There is no limitation. So what I ask myself again and again is, what am I thinking that's different than what God's thinking? What am I believing that's different than what God is putting out into the universe all the time? Ernest said, we cannot afford to believe in imperfection for a single second. Now, I know that's hard, but he's trying to teach us to be more absolute in our approach to the teaching. That don't give what you don't want any attention. Let alone don't build a shrine to it in your heart. Because I think this is where we get ourselves in hot water. Either we believe that God is all, or we don't. Either we believe that things are perfect on the unseen side of life and the outer life that we experience is becoming perfect, or we believe, there's just imperfection and you can't do anything about it. So what are we to do? What are we to do? Well, you know what? Because we're talking to ourselves all the time, one of the things I like to say is, perfect God within me, come forth. I think that comes out of the teaching of Emma Curtis Hopkins. In one of her books, she says that the student of truth must say again and again, Spirit of God within me, come forth. Right? And so if I take that, and I say, okay, so if I'm dealing with something that has to do with my health, I could say, Spirit of God that is perfect health within me, come forth. Spirit of God within me that is abundance, come forth. Spirit of God that is within me that is love, come forth now. See, because every day we're going to be faced with lots of powerful things that seem powerful out here in the world, you know? And it can certainly look like things in the world have huge power over us, you know? Seeing a job as the source of our good, as the source of our supply, or a spouse as the source of love in our life, or a particular avenue as the only avenue of creative expression, you know, it's just off, you know, it's just off because it's so limited. And the principle that we work with is infinite. The principle we work with is unlimited. So how many times, you know, do we see or hear something and say to ourselves something like, oh, there goes my chance, or now what I want's not going to work out, or something like that. See, the effects we see look so convincing to us, and to pretty much most of the world, that we think they must be ultimate reality. But they are not the ultimate reality. Ultimate reality exists in spiritual truth. So if we believe the outer manifestations of the world, then we have been essentially hypnotized by the thinking of the world around us, you know? And our job as students of New Thought is to see beyond that, right? Because there cannot be God or God as all and the manifestations that exist in the world. It's either all God, in which case, okay, there's nothing to worry about. It's all God. Or none of it's God, in which case we are in deep mushrooms. We have a lot of problems, right? Somewhere, I think along the line, it probably happens for every person that we make a decision that is not supporting our life today. You know? That we have neglected the idea that it is the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. So the Father, Mother, God only knows to give of itself. And it is our job as expressions of the One to be gracious receivers of all that God has to give. Do you remember Mr. Rogers? They're actually doing a movie on Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers' neighbor. You know, it's a wonderful day in the neighbor. Remember Mr. Rogers? I love Mr. Rogers. He always wore that sweater. I thought he looked very like uncle-ish, you know, like he should be somebody's uncle. Anyway, Fred Rogers said, the greatest gift we can ever give to another person is to graciously receive whatever it is they are trying to give us. All right? Because there's circulation happening here. You know, and I think that in Science of Mind, we learn to become gracious receivers of all that God has to give. You know, and it's not like we receive it and have to hold on to all of it. The trick is always about receiving, you know, bringing in and giving back out, and receiving in and giving back out, and keeping it in the flow, right? Because flow means that it's moving, right? There were 2 shipwrecked sailors floating adrift for a number of days on a raft. And one of them starts to pray, God, I haven't lived a good life. I've been a gambler and a drunk and a carouser and a liar and a cheat. But if you save me, I promise that I will. And then the other sailor says, hold on, I think I see land. You know, if we're battling something out here, what you'll find is there are always more things to battle out here in the outer world. Right? It's endless. It's exhausting. You know, but as students of New Thought, we want to come into an awareness of a greater spiritual reality. You know, this is what Emmett Fox gives us in The Golden Key, a way, a very simple practice. Because I can catch myself time and time again. I'll have meditated, I'll have done my prayer work, my treatment, I've done my spiritual reading, but then something grabs my attention and I'm thinking along a line that I don't really want to be thinking. You know, and it's so helpful to catch myself and say, oh, I should think about God instead. I should think about God instead here. Right? Again, God gave us dominion. And I believe it is our job, our right, our privilege to exercise it. You know, we can't just lay back and let the universal beliefs, what do I mean by universal beliefs? the race consciousness, the thinking of the world around us, what Jung called the herd mind. We can't let that just be acting on us. One of the ways I say it is, there's a great big universe out there, right? And if you don't take charge of your thinking, other people will do it for you. The problem with that is they will not think along your highest good, they will think along their highest good, right? So this is why we have to really be the keeper at the gate of our own mind again and again and again. Now, everybody gets to go through life their way, right? We get that, right? But it would serve us to recognize that at least in our life, we're the chooser. We're the one who's always choosing. And the great thing is, this is one of the things I love about the science of mind, is that if I recognize that my choice has not been good, all I've got to do is choose again. I can choose something else. It's like you can go back to the menu. You know, if you go to a restaurant and you eat something and you say, I like the restaurant, you know, the place is beautiful, the help is great, but what I picked wasn't so good. You just, next time you look on the menu, you pick something else. It would be crazy to pick the same thing if it wasn't that good, right? And so this is essentially what we do, you know, that I get to choose again. You know, and I would ask us to think about that today. Where in our life right now do we need to choose again? Where am I? And you know, this to me seems to be the defining principle in this. If there's some place in my life where I am not happy, peaceful, free, feeling only love, if I'm not experiencing those things, I should choose again. I've got to choose something differently, because something on some level that I am choosing is contributing to not being peaceful, not being happy, not feeling loving, not feeling free. There's a story of a monk who, in his travels, found this very, very precious stone. And he kept it in a bag with his few measly possessions. And he met a traveler one day. And while he was visiting with the traveler, he was taking things out of his little bag. And the traveler sees the stone. And the monk, and he really admires it. And the monk very readily just gives it to him. Says, oh, you like it? You can have it. Now, it's very, very valuable. So the traveler departs, and he's just overjoyed that he has received this very, very valuable stone from the monk. This will surely be enough wealth for all of the days of his life, and perhaps some of his ancestors as well. Days later, the same traveler comes back searching frantically for the monk. And he gives the monk back the stone. And he says, now, he says, I've had the stone. He says, but what I realize I really want, is what it is you have that enabled you to part with the stone so freely. So in Science of Mind, we teach that love will lift us up. Love always lifts us up. And spiritual law never lets us down. Let's pray. So we turn our attention inward for a moment, just remembering that right here, where we are, God is. The very love of God that created the entire universe is within each and every one of us here this morning. And we're all connected with each other on the unseen side. And so I speak the word for each and every one of us that we are in the process of becoming more in consciousness. That all of the qualities, all of the attributes of God already exist within us, and we say yes to them, and we open a way out for the Spirit within us to express in a greater way in our life. So we include in our prayer today our family members, our friends and loved ones, and we know for each and every one of them that God is right where they are. And if we're tempted to think of their troubles, what we do is we think about God instead. We let our prayer be a blessing in the world around us. All the things that pull at our attention, we think about God instead. We bless our church. We bless all churches everywhere. Synagogues and temples and mosques and ashrams, all paths to God. And I'm absolutely convinced that we are blessed by being together in consciousness today. That there is great healing, great increase, great love available for each and every one of us. And we say yes to it. We are gracious receivers in God's universe. And so with a full heart, I give thanks that this is the truth. I release this word, and so it is. Together we all say, Amen.